What's up guys, Lifting here. In this video I'm going to give you a guide of the build that I've been playing the last 2 weeks or so. And this build is a Crit-Ice-shot-Puncture ranger. It is incredibly tanky, it deals lots of damage, and it is in my opinion a lot of fun to play as well. The build will be able to farm level 78 maps and could potentially kill Atziri as well with the right gear. However, that is not something I'm going to go into detail about in this guide. And lastly, I should mention that this build is both viable for softcore and hardcore. And the reason I call this build a beginner's build is mainly because it doesn't require lots of expensive gear to become strong. As a matter of fact, you can get away with nothing more than a 4-link for your main offensive skills, and that is actually what I am doing right now and what you're seeing in the background. However, getting a 5-link would greatly increase the power of the build, but we'll talk more about the skill gems later. Now, let me break down the build for you. For offense we use Ice Shot for AoE damage and Puncture for single target damage. Ice Shot is very efficient at taking down large groups of monsters if linked with the right support skill gems. Additionally, Puncture with the right skill gem setup can pretty much one-shot bosses and exiles. Both Ice Shot and Puncture rely on critical hits to deal the bulk of the damage. And for that reason our curse of choice is the Assassin's Mark curse, which will grant a higher chance of scoring a critical strike and also increasing the damage of the critical hit. The defensive powers of this build lies in its high evasion rating. As you can see, we have 46% chance to evade attacks in level 76 or in level 76 constant. Additionally, we have 40% chance to dodge attacks, so we are now at 86% chance to evade in praxis. And we have 30% chance to dodge spells as well. So that's really powerful. Additionally, we are using Ondar's Guile, which doubles our chance to evade projectile attacks. So we are really strong against projectile attacks, and that's the reason that we don't have to fear reflect damage from our Ice Shot or Puncture as well. Additionally, this build also picks up a lot of the life skill nodes throughout the skill tree, and that leaves us with a total of a 158% increase to maximum life when the build is completely done. And as you can see, I'm not completely done with this build yet. My current project, or the thing that I'm moving towards at the moment, is to pick up these really nice flask nodes over here. Alright, so now that I've given you a basic overview of the defensive capabilities of this build, let's talk about the skill gem setups that we choose to incorporate for this build, to see how we actually end up dealing the damage and what kind of auras and that kind of stuff that we're using for this build. Alright guys, let's go over the skill gems that we use for this build. The main attack that we're using is Ice Shot, and Ice Shot is linked with weapon elemental damage, and that's because of Herald of Ash, as it will further boost the damage of Herald of Ash in that way. And it is linked with Pierce and physical projectile attack damage. The Puncture ability that we're using, our secondary main attack or secondary attack, if you want to call it that, is linked with increased critical damage, which will make our critical strikes deal a lot more damage, and that's really what we want with Puncture. It's linked with additional accuracy so that we hit more frequently and more reliably. And as you can see, I'm using a 20% quality additional accuracy gem, and that's really nice for this build as well, because it will give us increased critical strike chance as well. But you don't have to get a quality additional accuracy gem. It is just like it's a nice bonus if you can afford it. And lastly, it is linked with physical projectile attack damage, and that basically just makes Puncture deal more damage, which will leave the bleed effect deal a lot more damage as well. To get even more damage and greater clear speed, we're using Herald of Ash, and we have linked Herald of Ash with elemental proliferation to spread the burn effect, and to increase the damage of the burn effect we're using increased burning damage. And lastly, it is linked with reduced mana. Linking Herald of Ash with both elemental proliferation and increased burning damage will increase the amount of mana reservation. If I were to take out increased burning damage, you can see that we are reserving less mana. At the moment it reserves 25, and if we put this one in again, it reserves 31%. If you want, you could instead use Hatred. Hatred will have a higher tool DPS, however, I have found that in my experience using Herald of Ash, you will be able to clear content faster because of the elemental proliferation effect. It will basically spread out through the map, and it will kill monsters far away as you progress throughout the game. And because the weapon we're using isn't too fast, having that constant burn effect is really nice as well, and it will take down those mobs that are already on low life. So in my experience and in my opinion, I feel like Herald of Ash is superior to Hatred. But if you're playing in softcore, you can, instead of using Grace, as I am using here as a defensive aura, choose to use Hatred instead, which would leave you with a lot of DPS. Hatred along with Herald of Ash would increase your DPS a lot. However, for this build I am using Grace, and I've linked it with reduced mana obviously, and I'm also using Smoke Mine and Assassin's Mark in this setup as well. And Assassin's Mark, as you can see, the mana cost is 55, and that's actually a lot since we're already reserving so much mana, and that's the reason that I have linked it with reduced mana. And Smoke Mine is just here because, well, I really didn't know what to put here otherwise. And Smoke Mine is really nice for when we're opening strong boxes. I'm using it all the time. It makes your play style a lot more safe. The last skill gem setup is cast when damage taken setup, and cast when damage taken here is level 9, and we have linked it with Enduring Cry, level 10, increased duration. At the moment it is level 17, and you can level any support gem in a cast when damage taken to level 20, so just do that. I will eventually get to level 20 with my increased duration skill gem. And lastly, Immortal Call. This will make our character cast Enduring Cry, get those endurance charges up, and then proc Immortal Call, which will make our character immune to physical damage for a few seconds. But I'm really not sure if I actually want to use this cast when damage taken setup. It is nice, but honestly, I don't think I need it that much. But for now, I'm still going to keep using it until at least I find a different or better alternative. But if you guys don't want to use this cast when damage taken setup, that is really not a problem. Oh yeah, and lastly we're using a Vol Haste linked with increased duration. Okay, so let's talk about the skill tree, guys. And I will here show you how I suggest you level this character. But keep in mind, you can of course level it any way you would like to. But this is just the way I prefer to do it, and it worked great for me. So the way that I did it was to pick up this attack speed skill node here first. 8% increased attack speed is actually pretty strong for a single skill node, so that's why we're doing it. After that, I picked up the evasion and life skill nodes here and went into finesse. Finesse will grant us attack speed and extra accuracy rating with some dexterity. After that, I suggest you pick up Heart of the Oak for the increased maximum life and the 1% life regenerated per second. And I would also suggest that you pick up Primal Spirit, and the reason we pick up this is of course the increased mana regeneration is obviously nice, but more importantly the 20 plus to strength and intelligence is greatly needed for this build, as you will experience when leveling this build. When you've picked up Primal Spirit, I would suggest heading into Ballistic Mastery for the projectile speed and projectile damage. When you have done that, we're going to pick up these bow damage and attack speed skill nodes and head into Aspect of the Eagle for the increased physical damage, accuracy, life and movement speed that it provides. After that, we're going to pick up the bow attack speed and critical strike chains skill nodes here, and then we're going to head into Revenge of the Hunted, this notable here. And the Revenge of the Hunted, as you can see, grants us increased physical damage, evasion and life. After that, we're also going to pick up these two evasion and life skill nodes here. When we have done that, we're going to head into acrobatics. Try to keep in mind that acrobatics will reduce your armor and energy shield by 50%, so I really suggest that you level right from the beginning with evasion gear on. Otherwise you'll experience your armor and energy shield gear become a lot weaker when you pick up this notable here. However, that 30% chance to dodge attacks will greatly improve your survivability if you're using evasion based gear. 30% chance to dodge attacks along with mediocre or even bad evasion gear in the beginning when leveling up makes a huge difference. When you've picked up acrobatics, we're going to move towards Underskyle down here. But before we pick up Underskyle, we're going to pick up Herbalism along with the two life skill nodes here. Herbalism will award us a lot of increased life, but it will also increase the power of our flasks. After you've picked up Herbalism, you're going to pick up Underskyle. When we have picked up Underskyle, we're going to head back to the top of the skill tree, or around the shadow parts of the skill tree. Shadow parts. Anyway, we're going to head into the dexterity skill nodes here and then pick up Blood Drinker for the extra life, and the 2% of physical attack damage leads us life, which is really nice for our build. After that, we're going to pick up the dexterity node here, and then pick up quickness. And the reason we go through this way and not up here is that we will eventually pick up these skill nodes here. But we're going to pick up quickness for the 20% increased physical damage and the 5% increased movement speed. When we have picked up quickness, we're going to head into the sniper notable here for the projectile speed and projectile damage, and then into coordination that will grant us 12% increased attack speed along with 20 dexterity. The 6% increased attack speed, we don't really care about that, besides the effect that it has on our curses. Anyway, from here we're going to pick up a blood siphon. A blood siphon is really powerful. Take a look at that. 12% increase in maximum life along with 20 strength that we greatly require, as I said earlier. And we're also picking up these two 6% life skill nodes here. When we've picked up the life nodes, we're going to head into trickery, because trickery will increase our elemental damage by 20%, and that influences both Ice Shot and Herald of Ash. Additionally, it will grant us 20 intelligence that we once again greatly require for this build, and it will grant us 20% increased critical strike chance. And that is obviously great for a critical strike chance based build. So good stuff here. When we've picked up trickery, we have started down the path of critical strike chance skill nodes. And to follow up on that, we're going to head down towards Under Skyle again, and we're going to pick up these bow, critical strike chance and multiplier skill nodes, and then lethality. Lethality is a really powerful notable that will grant us 16% increased physical damage with bows, 50% increased critical strike chance with bows, and 30% increased critical strike multiplier with bows. Pretty sweet. When we've picked up lethality, we're going to head down towards King of the Hill, and we're going to pick that up, obviously. King of the Hill will grant us 80% increased critical strike chance with bows. Pretty sweet, and it will enable us to knock back enemies if we score a critical strike chance with a bow. And that is actually really nice because it will make kiting a lot easier, and it will also help give us an indication of when we are actually critting. And as far as I know, when using knockbacks along with puncture, it actually counts as movement. So if you puncture a target and you crit, it will be knocked back, but it will be punctured first. So as it gets knocked back, it will count as movement. So it will bleed a lot in that half second, you know. So that's actually really nice. After we have picked up King of the Hill, we're going to head up towards Assassination in the Shadow Tree. Assassination will grant us 30% increased critical strike chance, 35% increased critical strike multiplier, and we're obviously getting the 20% increased critical strike chance from both of these skill nodes here. After we have picked up Assassination, we're going to head down towards the Ranger Tree again, and we're going to pick up these two 25% increased critical strike chance skill nodes, and lastly the 25% increased critical strike multiplier notable here. Really nice. This is a really strong critical anything wheel we have here. From this point on, I would suggest you pick up piercing shots. Piercing shots will grant us a 30% chance of projectiles piercing, and because I have a quality pierce gem linked with my ice shot, I don't need to pick up these two skill nodes here that will grant us 5 additional chance of projectiles piercing per skill node. I can simply pick up these 8% increased projectile damage skill nodes and this piercing shots notable here. That will grant me 100% pierce chance at the later levels when my pierce gem is high enough level. If you don't have a quality pierce skill gem, you might want to consider picking up these to get enough pierce chance. After you've picked up piercing shots, I would suggest we move towards the True Strike notable over here that will grant us 50% increased critical strike chance and 10% increased critical strike multiplier. And we are of course also picking up these two skill nodes here on a way that will give us 15% increased critical strike chance. After we've picked up True Strike, I would recommend picking up Harrier. Harrier is really nice. It will grant us 10% increased attack speed, some cast speed, and some movement speed. And again, movement speed is really nice for a build that requires you to kite, so Harrier is perfect for our build. Or I would actually like to see it add some critical strike chance and multiplier as well, but hey, that is probably not going to happen. Anyway, from this point on, we're going to pick up Hired Killer for the extra increased life and some life gained on kill. And I would also suggest that you pick up these extra dodge skill notes and the face acrobatics keystone here. 30% chance to dodge spell damage, not bad. When you have done that, it is time to pick up some more pure damage for your bows. And the way that we're going to do that is by picking up these bow damage skill notes here and these bow damage and movement skill notes here. And lastly, picking up Avatar of the Hunt for that 25% increased physical damage with bows and 3% increased movement speed. When you have done that, we're going to move down towards the duelist area, where we are going to pick up additional bow damage skill notes along with the bow damage and attack speed skill note and the Master Fletcher that will also grant us 25% increased physical damage with bows. Really nice. When you've picked up Master Fletcher, I would recommend that you pick up Thick Skin for the extra life and then move towards the top of the tree again into the shadow area where we're going to pick up Depth Perception. I have no idea how to pronounce that. I am not able to control my tongue to make that sound correctly. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. We want Depth Perception. And Depth Perception is great because it awards us increased accuracy and increased critical strike chance. And so does the skill notes here. Lastly, I would suggest that you pick up these Life and Flask skill notes up here along with Profane Chemistry. And when you've picked up these skill notes, the build is basically complete, guys. But if you want to keep leveling up, I would suggest that you simply pick up more bow damage. And you can do that by picking up these skill notes and notables over here, Deadly Draw and Heavy Draw. However, I don't find them to be too efficient, and that is why I don't suggest that you pick them up before the really late parts of the game. Anyway, let's move on and talk about what kind of stats you should try to get on your gear. Okay guys, so let's say that you are Resistance Cat, which you should always be. You should always be Resistance Cat when playing in Merciless difficulty. But after you have become Resistance Cat, your main priority for defensive stats on your gear is to get life. Your second priority is to get evasion. Your third priority is to get either strength or intelligence. And your last priority is to get chaos resistance. Chaos resistance isn't too important, but it is nice to have. But as you can see, I have no chaos resistances actually. But I'm still able to do 75 maps in Beyond League. So, hey, if you can get additional chaos resistance, that is nice, but don't go out of your way to get it. Getting more life or evasion is, in my opinion, more important. Alright, so let's talk about offensive stats as well and what you should try to get on your gear. Your first priority is of course to get as much physical damage as possible. Elemental damage will improve your damage as well because you're using Ice Shot and Herald of Ash, but I would suggest that you focus on getting yourself increased physical damage. Secondly, you want as high critical strike chance and critical strike multiplier. That is really important as well. Thirdly, you want attack speed, but it isn't too important for this kind of build since we want to be hitting slowly and we want to be hitting hard. And your last priority would be to get something like accuracy to make sure that you're hitting more consistently. And I would really recommend you guys to either use a Decimation Bow or a Harbinger Bow. And the reason you want either a Harbinger Bow or a Decimation Bow as the one that I'm using right now is that the Harbinger and Decimation Bow is able to roll the implicit mod increased critical strike chance. In my personal opinion, I would rather use the Harbinger Bow than the Decimation Bow, and that's because the Harbinger Bow has a 1.2 attacks per second, whereas the Decimation Bow has a 1.1. So try to get yourself a Harbinger or Decimation Bow and either trade or craft yourself a really good one of those with lots of increased physical damage and flat physical damage added as well. And the flasks that I have chosen for this build are 2 Seething Hallowed Life Flasks, a Bubbling Eternal Mana Flask, an Ample Jade Flask of Reflexes, and a Surgeon's Quicksilver Flask of Warning. And my Seething Hallowed Flasks, along with my Bubbling Mana Flask, will allow me to dispel Frozen and Chilled, dispel Shocked, dispel Burning, and the Ample Jade Flask will greatly improve our evasion rating. Let me show you. We press defenses here, and as you can see right now we have 8,202 evasion rating. If I press my Jade Flask, we have 21,475 or 74 evasion rating. That is pretty sick. That actually took us up to 65% chance to evade along with a 40% chance to dodge attacks, so that's pretty cool. And the reason I'm using a Surgeon's Quicksilver Flask is, of course, since we're critting all the time, we can basically refill a flask really quickly and keep using it. Additionally, when using a Flask of Warding, it makes us immune to curses, and since the effect of the Quicksilver Flask will always last 6 seconds, we are basically immune to curses for 6 seconds every time that we're using the Quicksilver Flask. And since we can use the Quicksilver Flask pretty much all the time because we're critting and refilling it, well, we can basically dispel and become immune to curses all the time. For this build, there's 3 unique items I would recommend, or 2 if you're playing in a softcore league. And please note that I say recommend, these items are by no means required for the build to function. The first of these items is the Drill Neck Quiver, and this unique item will grant us attack speed, lots of evasion rating, life, and some additional flat physical damage, and lastly and most importantly, the unique affix projectile damage increased by arrow pierce chance. And this basically means that Drill Neck will allow us to add our percentage of chance to pierce with ice shot or puncture to the damage these skills will do. And that means that if our ice shot has a 100% chance to pierce, then the projectiles will deal an additional 100% damage as well. And that is pretty sick. Notice that this quiver already has the implicit mod of adding 10% chance of arrows piercing as well. The downside to this quiver is that it has no resistances and it is very costly. The current price in Beyond League is about 5 to 6 Exalted Orbs. If you can't afford that, don't worry, just try to get yourself a good rare quiver with the prioritized defensive and offensive stats that we just talked about. The second unique I would recommend is the Worm's Mold Belt, and although this is a low level belt, it is very good for our build. Not only does it provide life, it also adds cold resistance and the very needed strength and intelligence. Lastly, it provides 2% mana and life leech. The mana leech is very important as you would otherwise have to get it on other pieces of gear or through the skill tree. Mana leech is a necessity for this build. Luckily, a Worm's Mold is fairly cheap, but since you will be using it through most of the game, I would recommend getting yourself one with almost perfectly rolled affixes to begin with, which of course makes it somewhat more expensive. The last unique item I would recommend you to get is only relevant if you're playing in a hardcore league. It is the Lightning Coil Body Armor, and Lightning Coil adds lots of armor, evasion and life. However, the thing that makes Lightning Coil so very powerful is its unique affix, 40% of physical damage taken as lightning damage. This is really strong for an evasion based character that normally doesn't have any physical damage reduction. The downside here is that the Lightning Coil reduces your lightning resistances by 60%, which means that you'll have to get a lot of additional lightning resistances on your other gear to compensate for this, and that can be quite tedious and annoying. A Lightning Coil in the Beyond League typically costs around 2 to 4 Exalted Orbs, depending on the affix rolls. But hey, as I said, if you aren't playing in Hardcore League, then it would probably be better to get yourself a good rare 5 or 6 link chest armor with lots of life, evasion and resistances. And that's it for the gear. Now let me quickly give you a leveling tip here. Since leveling with bow skills aren't too efficient in the beginning of the game, I would instead suggest that you level with Spectral Throw linked with added fire damage, lesser multiple projectiles and faster attacks. And you can basically do that for the first 40 to 50 levels if you want to. At level 40 I switched over to Ice Shot and it was really efficient from there on. However, leveling with Ice Shot is completely viable as well if you'd rather just do that. Lastly, for the bandit quests, you should help Oak on normal and cruel difficulty for the extra life and increased physical damage, and on Merciless I recommend killing them all for the passive skill point. And that's pretty much it for the build, guys. I hope you guys like it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section or by going to the Path of Exile forum thread, which I will link to in the description of the video. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?